was him screaming at me and just berating me and then accusing me that I was cheating on him.
Thank you for tuning in to the Sally Allen podcast, where we give voice to stories of resilience. It's your host, Sally Allen, again. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We have a wonderful guest. I heard her story. Someone told me about her. I met with her and heard her story. And I just knew that our listeners need to hear this story because, as you know, on this podcast, we share stories of resilience to encourage other people and to give them hope. And I feel like Emily's story could give you hope. So, Emily Stevens, welcome to the Sally Allen podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Emily has never shared her story before, and we're really honored for you to hear it first in this fashion. So thank you. I'm honored that you're sharing it with me, and I take this very seriously. So with that, Emily, when we met, you told me this incredible story. You are not the person you were 10, 15 years ago. You were a completely different human being, and you had to go through something. You didn't have to, but you went through something so traumatic that it made you who you are today. So talk to us about that. Share your story with us.
So I think it starts, context I think matters here. So I was raised in a very conservative home. So there's kind of like that upbringing in the bubble type thing. And so as a result, being very religious in my upbringing, I went off to a Bible college. And that's where I met my ex-husband. And he was a preacher's son. And there's a lot of pressure that comes with being a preacher's kid or a missionary kid. The parents are looked to as these grand godly leaders, and if their kids don't rise to what everybody expects them to be, it's very hard. And I think that was definitely the case for my ex-husband. It was a struggle for him. We got married very young. He was 19, I was 20. And I would say about a month and a half in to the marriage, I realized very quickly, I think I might have made a mistake.
Oh, okay.
There were some things going on that made me go, there's some red flags here I didn't see before. And as a result, I was really concerned. But at that point, I learned very quickly there was nothing I could do, not only because I was raised to believe that divorce was not an option, but because I found out I was pregnant. And so that added to it. It was one of those things where in this system, if you have a child, you really can't divorce. You shouldn't, because you don't want to raise your kids without
two parents,
a father, two parents. Yeah, you don't want to do that. And so I felt this need to stay.
Yeah.
And that's what I did, and things kind of went downhill from there.
Yeah. Wow. Emily, did you think that those red flags you saw and those things that you saw, it had something to do with the high pressure environment he grew up in?
I think that's part of it. I do. It's really hard for young people who are raised in that environment when they have that impression or that pressure. If they haven't learned to thrive on it, then what they learn is how to. Basically, they learn not to be accountable for actions, because the family doesn't usually want that person to, or their actions, especially if they're not doing well, they don't want it to be seen by the public. So a lot of the things that they'll do get swept under the rug so that maybe nobody in the church knows, nobody can find out. So there's always a lot of skeletons in the closet. And so when you're that young person, you get kind of used to this idea of, well, it doesn't really matter what I do. It'll get swept under the rug.
Yeah. It's funny that you said that. Sometimes I coach young, 30 to 35, of age executives, and some of the things that they struggle with when we go back into their past, it starts from that, the lack of accountability, maybe a parent comparing them to the other sibling or something like that. And it's so prevalent when they see it and they realize, oh my gosh, this is where it started. But a lot of times they don't have the self-awareness that this is what's happening, and they're becoming that adult.
Yeah.
So for you to go through that, wow. So you had your first baby, and
So I have my son. I love him very much. He's about to be 19.
Wow.
He's serving in our United States Army. I'm very proud of him. But back then, what was happening in our home was I found out when I had the uh-oh moment. It was I started to realize that there were some drug problems. There was some alcohol problems. There was, and then later realized, oh, it's an addiction problem. And so then, because of those things, I started to feel like maybe after a few years of marriage, I started to feel like there might be a bipolar issue, because there were manic moments and there were very, very bad, down, depressed moments as well. It was very hard to deal with. And again, because of my upbringing, you have to understand, we didn't talk about psychological issues like that. If you had a problem, it was a God. You had a God problem. You had your relationship with God wasn't right. There was no such thing. We didn't talk about someone being bipolar, or maybe they have a personality disorder or something like that. So I had to kind of learn that on my own. And so after a few years, and my second son was born, I remember thinking and even telling him, like, hey, it's like walking on eggshells with you. I never know what I'm going to get. Have you ever thought that maybe you might have an issue? And that didn't go over very well. And we find out much, much later, after I got out of that situation, that he was indeed diagnosed with bipolar, which is one of the reasons why a lot of bipolar folks will seek drugs or a high, because they miss the manic moments. So when they go really low, they seek those things for those high moments. And so, I was living with someone who struggled with addiction, and I didn't realize that's what was going on for a while. And I was I was with someone who struggled with his own psychological disorder, and he didn't know. So he was not medicated.
Yeah, I want to camp on that for a minute, because especially when it comes to religion, and you can pray somebody out of something like that, which isn't the case, right? And sometimes they do need that medication, and they do need to get the right help. You just can't pray sometimes, God delivers, but you can't pray somebody out of being bipolar.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And if there's a woman listening to this, what would you say to her on that part?
Oh, man, that's tough. I think, and the reason why I say it's tough is because if you're with somebody who, most folks, and I don't want to put a blanket on this because it's not true for everyone.
Right.
Some folks who are bipolar, they take their medication and they're fine. But many struggle with taking their medication because they actually enjoy the high. They like those manic moments they like. And even my ex-husband, when he was placed on what they put him on, they put him on a heavy drug. I'll tell you about that in a little bit, but he said it made him feel like a zombie, so he didn't take it. And I think that a lot of folks who struggle with bipolar feel that way because the high emotions that they're used to feeling when they go through their manic moments, they start to miss it. And so then once they level out on medication, they're like, see, I'm fine. I don't need this.
Yeah.
And so if they're not great at managing the meds and all of that, you could find yourself in a very dangerous situation.
Yeah. So you think the way, the situation you were in and what was happening was because of that psychological issue that he had.
That was part of it.
That's part of it.
And the addiction. And then some of the upbringing stuff, the lack of accountability and those types of things, they all kind of played a part in the behaviors that I had to deal with.
Yeah. Are you comfortable walking us through some of the things you went through?
Sure. So I'm trying to think of where to start. When I was pregnant with my firstborn, it started with a lot of verbal abuse. There was a lot of, he was very angry. And he was also incredibly possessive. So it was one of those things where, you know, I'll never forget this. I was like, I think I was 7 months pregnant in the hot summer of Phoenix, Arizona. I had a big old belly, and I did not look good, that's for sure. And
I can't imagine you not looking good, by the way.
I put on a lot of weight with my pregnancies, believe me, it was not pretty. But anyways, there was this one time we shared a vehicle. We didn't have a lot of money. We shared a vehicle, and he usually just took it to work, and I was stuck at home. This one particular day, I was going to do something at the church with his mom, and so I had taken him to work. Well, he had texted me and said that he was going to be back at work. You know, he drove a bread route. He had a bread route. He said, "Oh, I'm going to be back at the facility in like 40 minutes." And I said, "Okay, great." And I still needed to take a shower. So I was like, it's only 15 minutes away, so I'll just take a shower and I'll go. So all in all, I ended up being about 5 minutes late to pick him up. And he was livid. And as soon as he got in the car, literally the whole way home, the whole drive, was him screaming at me and just berating me, and then accusing me that I was cheating on him, that the reason I was 5 minutes late is because I was back at the apartment, you know, having sex with someone else and all this stuff. And I was just like, are you crazy? And then it would progressively get worse. Again, we'd be in the car or something, and I learned to keep my head down, because even in the car, if there was another car in another lane and there happened to be a man in that driver's seat, he would say, "I saw you. I know you're looking at him. Is that what you want? You're such a whore." You know, these were the types of things that I would hear. And so,
paranoia.
Yeah. And so I learned early on, if I just kept my head down, it would create less tension. And then there was times like with, there was this one time where we were at church on a Wednesday night, and there was a group of us afterwards standing in a circle, like a large group. And one of them was one of his friends and his friend's wife and a bunch of other couples. He was talking to somebody else, and I was in the group just talking. And on the way home, he told me that I was a slut because I was trying to get with his friend, and that's why I was standing there in this large group of people. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, his wife is right there too, and she's my friend. Like, what are you even saying? He's like, you don't know him like I do, da-da-da, like all these things. And it turned into this massive fight, which ended up carrying into the house, which got ugly, which I can tell you about that later. But the whole thing was, you know, there was a level of possessiveness, and then also secluding me from friends, from family. Financially, I wasn't allowed to work. Not at all. I offered to go back to work so many times. No, you don't get to work. You stay at home and raise the kids. I didn't mind being at home with my kids. I love that.
Yeah.
But I also felt like I was trapped.
Right.
And that wasn't fun either. And so that was the psychological stuff that started, that continued on and would deepen.
Emily, did you share this with anyone when you were going through it? Like, did you ask for help, or did you think like, maybe this is how it should be and I need to get through this because I'm already married to him? What was your mindset?
When it was just psychological, I kept it to myself.
Okay.
I really believed what I was taught, which was that if I was a good wife and I prayed for him and I supported him no matter what, that he'd come around, that he would get better.
That's what you were told. Okay.
So that's what I believed. And but he got worse. And then when the physical stuff started, that's when I voiced it a couple of times, but never got any help, like real help. Nobody. You have to understand too, like this is it's one of those things in the church that it happens. There's a lot of things that happen, you know, because at the time we had moved to Arizona, and we were helping at his father's church. So there was like, you keep it together.
You keep it, yeah.
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 I'll give you a good example. One time, we used to be the ones that would open the church, like on a Sunday. And it was a Sunday evening. We got there before everybody else. We're unlocking all the doors.
Mm-hmm.
My oldest son was maybe 2, and he was standing in between a pew, and my newborn baby was in a car seat, and he was on the seat in the pew. And I was standing there. I think I was filling up like the little envelopes in the pews while he was unlocking the doors. And he came over to me, and I don't remember what he was angry about, but he came over to me, and I was trapped in this pew. My son was right behind me, and he laid hands on me. He pushed me down. I hit my head on the one part of the pew, and then I fell back. I fell on my 2-year-old, grabbed him. Thankfully, he didn't hit his head. And when I got up, I had tears in my eyes, and he was still like, very angry, yelling at me. And all of a sudden, we hear a door open, and he straightens up, and he looked at me, and he said, "Get it together." And he walked away. And I had to wipe my tears and nobody could know.
Wow.
So it was just one of those things where it was a different dynamic being in that kind of an abusive situation, because you had this responsibility. I felt this overwhelming responsibility to the church or to his family. They weren't the ones abusing me. He was.
Yeah.
So why would I ruin their reputation? So I'll be okay.
Although they weren't supportive to you, you just feel like this was your problem with them.
Yeah, this was just mine. Yeah.
I feel abuse like that is progressive.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm hearing you say, like it start off psychological, but then when that stopped, and then you guys were pretty young, so he's never done this with anyone like this before.
Correct.
So he didn't even probably knew what he was capable of.
Correct.
And he's learning, okay, she's taking it, but seems to me like you had a high tolerance because he had to up his game.
He did. Well, I fought back a few times.
Yeah.
This one time, I'll tell you something. This is crazy to me. This one time, we lived in a small trailer on the church grounds, and we had gotten into a fight. And because the trailer was very, very confined. It wasn't like a double wide. It was like a legit trailer. Yeah. And so it was very small space. And he would do this thing, and he did this our entire marriage. And it progressively got worse, like you said. But he would do this thing where he would get in my face and then tell me, "Why don't you get out of my face?" But he was the aggressor. And so he had backed me up against the bed, and there was nowhere to move. It was very small, and he'd gotten in my face, and he just went for it. He grabbed my throat, and he was squeezing, and I was like, grabbed his throat. But here's the difference. He was bigger than me, and I was down on the bed. So I'm reaching up, holding him. He's got me down like this. And I was starting to struggle for air. And he was about to go to a church meeting.
Oh my gosh.
I swear to God.
Really?
So he's like dressed nice. And so I reached up and I grabbed his collar and I ripped it. And when I did, he let go. And he's like, "This is my favorite shirt." He was so mad. And so he left. Thankfully, that stopped it. There was another time where he would follow me. He would get in my face, and if I could get away, I would, but he would follow me. And this one time I ran into the laundry room, and I was able to get in there before he could get in there. And when I went to close the door, he had managed, instead of putting his foot in the door, he had managed to put his face. And I was like, "Yep." Boom. And I slammed the door on his face. He had a massive bruise on the side of his face. So I used to fight back. Until I realized it was no longer wise for me to do that. When I started to realize that I was always the one that was the only time where I hurt him more than he hurt me.
Yeah.
Once that was the realization that it was just going to keep getting worse if I didn't just, figure out a way to neutralize it. He has spit in my face. I would say that's probably the worst. I think that kind of disrespect is that really messed with my psyche. I was pregnant at the time, and he was like pacing, and I was just sitting there listening to him yell at me, and I don't even remember what I was mad about. And he was getting himself worked up, and he just looked at me carrying his child and just spit in my face.
Oh,
walked
Emily,
off.
I'm so sorry. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
fine, but you get what I'm saying. It's one of those things where it's like it starts with the psychological, and then it starts to get physical. But then there's different levels to the disrespect, where you feel helpless.
Well, I think you and I talked a little bit about this when we discussed this initially, that the more we fight back and the more resilience we show, that's when the abuse amps up, right? And it goes from bad to worse, and until it gets to a point where now you're really getting beaten into submission, because that's the last thing that's remaining, right? I beat you into submission, and then eventually I kill you.
Yeah.
Right. So talk to us. Like it got to that point where, I can't imagine a worse, where like you can put down a woman like spitting on her. Like I just, that messed with my head when you told me that. Yeah, so bad. But you had 2 babies with him because you weren't getting the support you needed. You felt you had an obligation to stay there because of what you were taught in the church. You had to cover it up because you didn't want to embarrass his parents. You just felt this was your issue to deal with. Did you have family?
I did. I do. So to be clear, I believed that if I had faith, that's what I was taught. If I had faith, he would get better. So when I had my second child with him, I still was holding on to that. I would say by year 4, I hated him. The faith was gone. I hated him.
And by year 4, was it full on physical abuse?
Yeah. Well, he laid off a little bit after one particular scenario. I have a scar on my face that thankfully you can't see very well at all unless the sun hits me right, and then somebody will say, "You got something on your lip." And I'm like, "No, I don't. No, I don't. Let's not talk about that." After he when it happened, he had thrown me across a room, the kitchen actually, and there was little knobs on the drawers and stuff in the kitchen. And I had hit my head here, my face on the knob, and I fell on that whole right side, so my knee as well. And I hit the ground and I blacked out. And so when I came to, what woke me up was moisture. I could feel something coming in my mouth, and and my son was crying because I had fallen into him. Again, poor kid. He doesn't remember any of this, thankfully.
Thank goodness.
When I came to, there was blood everywhere, and my lip was completely split open at the top part, like from the top of my lip to my nostril was just open. And this is when I really knew. I had already reached out to a few people that I knew who were also in the ministry, and they basically said, you should just talk to your pastor. I'm like, the pastor is his father.
His father, yeah.
I'm not getting any help there. And they were like, well, we don't know what to tell you. So I already felt like I was on my own, but this was the kicker that did it for me. One of his family members came over. We were supposed to have barbecue that night. One of his family members came over after that incident, and I was still in the bathroom, like cleaning up my face and saying I needed to go to the hospital. And he was still screaming in the kitchen. And this family member walked in and was like, "What's going on?" And they wouldn't take me to the hospital. They took me to Walmart to get me a butterfly bandage to close that baby up. Got me some ice. They wouldn't take me to the hospital because they knew he'd get arrested.
Yeah.
So that's when I knew, like, really, really, I was alone. I was afraid of telling my family. One of the things that I know, and I'm sure other people can attest to this, is when you tell your family, if you're not sure you're going to leave,
right,
your family's going to hate that person.
Right.
And if you stay, it's just going to be miserable. Yeah, it's awkward.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to tell them.
You weren't ready.
But when I went home after that. And my dad told me, he's like, you're an adult and I know you're going to do what you want to do. So if you go back, I'm not going to be happy about it. But if he lays a hand on you again, it's not going to be good.
Yeah.
And so my parents, you know, they did the best they could with what they had and what they knew. And they also were trying to give me the space to be my own adult, my own, you know, and I was a mother. They didn't, you know, they just knew they wanted to protect me.
Yeah.
So they knew at that point. And they helped me when I finally did leave. My brother came and helped me as well. My family was a big support when I finally got out of that situation.
Yeah.
So,
wow. So Emily, when you had an epiphany though, right?
Yeah.
When you realized you're going to get out, you had an epiphany and you started working on yourself. Talk to us about that, because I feel sometimes women feel like they're stuck in a relationship for all the reasons above that you mentioned, but other reasons. You did some things for yourself while you were in it, if I remember correctly. And you started to see things differently. You were going places and you realized, like, this is not who I want to be. So while you're in it, if someone is in a relationship and they feel stuck, what can they do?
well, for me, it was a person who was outside of my normal environment.
Yeah.
So I was used to just people in the church, right? So you're always going to get the same opinion when
Yeah.
you hang around the same people.
Right.
So I met this woman who was not part of the church.
Right.
And she said to me, and I'm sure most women can attest to this, like I left him maybe 4 times and came back and came back. And that's normal, I hear. I've
Right.
learned that now. I didn't know that then,
Right.
but I guess that's normal. And we come back for different reasons. For me, it was always for my kids. I wanted my kids to have their father. I thought that was the right thing. And then this woman I had become friends with, who was outside my normal peer group, she said, Emily, I'm never going to tell you what you should or shouldn't do, but can I ask you a question? I said, yeah. She goes, do you want your sons to be like him? And I said, no, that's my biggest fear. And she goes, have you ever thought about the idea that if he is the only man in their life, the one that's helping raise them, that they might be just like him?
Oh, wow. That's powerful.
I left and never went back.
Wow.
Literally, I think I had him removed from our house the next day, because we had an altercation, but that's
Yeah.
how it came up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing you say, for anybody who's listening to this, is that sometimes you have to go outside the sphere of your circle, right? And find people with that voice of reasoning. That's one, right? It's so
Be willing
yeah,
to listen to people who maybe think differently than you.
exactly.
Yeah.
But secondly, when we, you know, I know friends, family members who will go back over and over again. We want to think the role model for our children, whether it's religious reasons or whatever, you want your child to have 2 parents. But is that the role model for anyone listening to this? Is that the role model you want for a child? Because that's basically, you're teaching them how to have a relationship.
Yeah.
They're watching and they're like sponges. They're picking up, and so it's okay for dad to beat mom up and she keeps coming back.
Yeah.
So that was so eye-opening, right? To say, like, if there is nothing that will make you leave, just think about that. If that's a role model you want for your children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was ultimately my kids that saved
Yeah.
us. I just wanting to be a good mother to them. I thought I was being a good mother by staying, and then getting this different perspective made me realize, like, wait a minute, I've got this wrong.
Right. It's almost like it was backward.
Yeah.
Right. You're staying for the wrong reasons, for the kids. But I think being in it, like, you're so immersed in it, you don't have time to think differently. You don't even know how to think differently, because you were 20 years old when you got into this. So how old were you when you left?
Well, that's a good question. It was, hold on. It was 2010. It was 2010. So
Okay.
I was 24.
24. Okay, so you endured You endured 4 years and then you left. So when you
It was
left,
5. Maybe I was
Okay.
25.
yeah,
Because we were together for 5 years.
right. So that was your first marriage. You had children. You were indoctrinated into the church. You did everything the church told you. You're coming out with the mindset of you're still in that mindset. How did you get out of it to be your own person today? Because I see a strong, a powerful, a confident woman today. How did you get there?
So, well, it started with, I will say, everybody's personality is different.
Yeah.
Mine is the type that is, if you tell me that I can't do something, I will say, just watch me.
Yes.
And the day that I had him removed from our home, his mother called me and told me I needed to get my heart right with God and I need to go back to my husband. And I said, that's not going to happen. You know why?
Yeah.
I'm not going back this time. And she said, well, I hope you're ready to eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for the rest of your life. And I thought, I will show her.
Right.
So for me, after that, I had a resolve. There was something in me that said, almost like a chip on my shoulder, that said, I'm going to have to prove
Right.
to everybody, including myself, that I can do this. Because it was a very scary thing.
Yeah.
I also determined that I didn't want to be a victim. I had been victimized,
Right.
but I did not want to be a victim. And so I had a really good boss shortly after. And she pulled me into her office and she said, Emily, I was making like $2,000 a month. That's it. We had nothing, my kids and I.
Yeah.
She pulled me into her office and she said, where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? And I said, I don't know. I just want to take care of my kids. And she was like, yeah, but where do you see yourself? Like, what does that look like? I was like, I don't know. I just want to take care of my kids. And she was getting very frustrated with me. And I was getting frustrated with her.
Right.
Like, I'm just trying to survive, lady. And what she was doing was she was trying to challenge my thinking beyond just that,
your kids.
that I could do more.
Yeah.
And what I learned was I started surrounding myself with people who believed in me sometimes more than I believed in myself.
Yes.
That helps a lot because you can have all the confidence in the world. You're still going to have your down days. So having those cheerleaders, having a good group, a good pack to encourage you along the way is vital. That helped me a lot, and it helped my mindset. The other thing I started to learn how to do was to celebrate small victories. I think it's so important. When I started, if I got a promotion, even if it was a little thing, if I got a new job, or if I was able to take the kids out to a nice dinner for once or whatever, I would celebrate that mentally. I would just internally celebrate that and say, look at how far you've come. When you do that, you start to be able to dream bigger because if you can celebrate what you can do now, then you can see bigger in the future.
Right.
Like, if I can do this, what else can I do?
Yeah.
And so I started to just change my thinking. I went and I got my degree. It took me 10 years to get my degree.
Congratulations,
Thank you.
Emily.
It took a lot. They told me, I went to the University of Phoenix shortly after I left him, and they said, all your college credits at that Bible college you went to, they're not going to transfer over. It was non-accredited. I said, okay. Wow. They said, hey, tell us about this high school. I said, well, it was a private Christian school, that I went to here. They're like, it wasn't accredited. You have to go get your GED.
Oh, wow.
So I felt like I was always having to overcome something new. Mm-hmm. Every time I was trying to do something good or something better for my life or for my kids' lives, there was a new obstacle.
Wow.
And what I've learned now is, if you've ever read the book Obstacles Away, you learn that these obstacles are set there for a reason. They're strengthening you. They're teaching you, giving you an opportunity to be better.
It's just a stepping stone to another challenge and where you're going. I love that book.
And it was part of my journey, Mm-hmm. And so I did that, and then I read. I like to read. I really like just surrounding myself with like-minded people, like yourself. I think it matters. It really helps a person if you are just coming out of something like this and you surround yourself with people who think negatively or continue to victimize themselves with their words and their thinking, if that's who you hang out with, you'll do the same thing and you will likely go back to your abuser.
Yeah, because you're the sum of the 5 people you hang out with.
Yes.
Yeah, and if you're not surrounding yourself with a strong tribe, I want to go back to something you said, because I say this a lot to people. If you don't have the strength to do the hard things, you have to borrow it from other people. Because there are days you're going to be on your face on the ground and you're going to need somebody else's strength to pick you up. And you're going to need their belief also. Because when you don't have belief in yourself, you have to borrow it from other people.
That's the truth.
And Emily, you are so right to surround yourself with people smarter than you, right? People stronger than you, people who are victors and they're not victims, because you are absolutely right. If those are the people you're hanging out with, the opposite of that, you're going to go right back into your situation. Yeah. So the wisest thing you could have done, and I always say this community is my number one pillar, surrounding myself with the right people.
Yeah.
So you surround yourself with the right people. And when I introduced you, I was so excited. And I forgot to introduce you as now you are Vice President of Business Development at RIZE Credit Union. You go, girl.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I know your kids must be so proud of you.
They're good boys. They're very
I can't imagine how proud they are. Yeah. How, you just rise above that. You will know the term Myri Muck, and you are today this beautiful gem. I always say it's good. It's okay to be beautifully broken.
Yeah.
Right? Because then you have to break a few omelets to a few eggs to make omelets, and that's what you are today. Just beautiful.
Thank you.
So what would you say to our listeners today, if they're listening to this and you have a really resilient story and you overcame and you work hard for who you are, especially your kids seems to be one of the biggest motivator and drivers to everything that you did.
Yeah.
What would you say to women listening to this, even if they don't have kids to be a motivator? What would you say?
I think at some point, if you're in the middle of it, you have to reach down deep and find more value in yourself than you do for that person. Part of another reason why I think people stay is that they either really genuinely love that person,
right,
and they think that they can change them, or they think that they're going to get better. They believe the lies that are being told, but they're valuing that person's happiness over their own. And so at some point you have to say, when do I get to be happy?
Wow.
Can I be happy?
Yeah.
And what does that look like? What would it look like for me if I was happy? What would my life look like? Just go there for a minute. And when you go there, even if it's without that other person, it can be done. You can get out. It wasn't easy. It never is.
Yeah.
But you can do it.
That's really powerful, Emily. What Emily's talking about, visualization. Visualize what you want and visualize how happy you can be. Visualize a life without the abuse and a life without the harm and the things you are going through. Put yourself first and value you first. And with that today, it's a wrap. Thank you for tuning in to the Sally Allen podcast, where we give voice to stories of resilience. Until next time, this is Sally Allen. Remember that every setback is a setup for a comeback. And remember, if you like this podcast, the only way we can get it out is if you like, subscribe, and share.